Okay, this is the intro to the Friday night Bible study for the 18th day of the 12th month. There'll be 13 months this year. It's the 22nd day of February 2019. I usually give the Hebrew date once we go live. We'll be streaming live tonight on Facebook Live Sabbath service page, and this recording will go into the archive. We will begin just as soon as we get a green light from Facebook Live. All right, ready or not, here we come. Greetings, brethren. Happy Sabbath. Welcome to the Friday evening Sabbath Eve Bible study. And I was just trying to check and make sure we are on the right channel, on the Sabbath service channel on Facebook Live. And, okay, let me tell you, though, what we're going to be doing tonight. Give you the date. This is the 18th of the 12th month on God's holy sacred calendar. It's the 22nd day of February 2019 on the pagan Roman calendar, and this is a leap year. Well, technically, that's only the world's term on the pagan Roman calendar. This is not a leap year on God's calendar, but it is, technically, it is what is called an extended year, or, the Jewish people call it a pregnant year. And hang on, I'll come close up in a second. I'm just trying to see if I can see our signal. I've got a green light here, but there it is. Okay, I see the live button on the Sabbath service page. And let's see. Okay, I see. All right, hey, Katrina. I see Katrina is with us. I'm hoping to see a couple of fellows out of New York with us. That I'm doing something special tonight because of the fellows. And if you guys get on, go ahead and maybe leave me a note. Let me know you're there. All right, what we're doing tonight, I'm going to be reading as much of, hopefully all, of Mr. Armstrong's booklet entitled, Does God Exist? And, interestingly, it seems that God is bringing new and even young people into his body, as he has a couple of fellows out of New York who've been keeping the weekly and annual Sabbaths for a number of years. And not to embarrass anybody, but I when we're new in the faith, or when we're first coming along, I can remember those days. I was wondering, what are we doing here on this earth? And one of the other early questions I had was, why? Why are there so many different churches? Now, this was before I ever heard Mr. Armstrong speaking. And I was saying, why is there a church on every corner that are different? Methodist, and across the street, catty corner, is a Baptist, and across the street the other way from them is a Presbyterian. Go down the block, half a block, and they take up the whole block. There's a big old Catholic school or facility and church building, cathedral as they would call it. And why all this? And then what else was on my mind? Let's see. And then when I saw Matthew 16:18, while I was going down into the woods behind my home and spending the day reading the Bible, trying to figure out, what God's up to. And when I saw Matthew 16:18, where he said, I will build my church, and then the questions I had just zeroed in on that scripture, so that I was saying, okay, God, that's singular. I could see that. I will build my church. That was not saying my churches, the Catholic, the Baptist, the Presbyterian, the Methodist, etc., 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 etc. Even now, you'd have to add into that the ABC and the XYZ Church of God. Which one of these is God's church? And so I started praying and asking God, where is that church that Christ said he's building? I had to plead with him for 3 weeks, and I feel both fortunate and thankful that God chose to answer me and to say, okay, Stephen, you really want to know? I'm going to begin to reveal it to you. And he began to reveal it to me by opening up a broadcast to me. I was tuned in on one night. I wasn't sleeping. I was staying up all night praying and asking God, where is your church? And so, like I said, he gave me some relief on that. I was planning on another night of pleading with him about where is your church. So I'm paused in the early evening listening. I went up to the backyard where my dad had a swing. I don't think we had the swimming pool yet. He dug that swimming pool some years later. Yeah, there was just a swing in the backyard. And I sat down in the swing, took a portable radio outside, and tuned into some what was then called good music, some nice melodic, rhythmic music. And that happened to be the station on which the World Tomorrow broadcast was carried. And the music was interrupted that evening at about 6:30 p.m. it was, when that program was being carried then in the Birmingham, Alabama area. And as music came on, and friends, why is there a church on every corner? I could say, wait a minute, that's what I just been asking God in prayer. And what are we doing here on the earth? Hey, that's another question I just been asking God. And what else did he say that I had just been asking God in prayer and pleading with him? And where is God's true church? Hey, mister, were you listening in on my prayers recently or something? You're asking exactly the questions I've been asking all week and the week before and the week before that. And he had my ears all attention. I said, wow, 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 wow. I said, as I was listening, I was saying, God, thank you. You've brought along someone who is answering my prayers. And, I don't know if it's going to come up in this booklet tonight or not, but there is one proof of God answered prayer. And now, if I have this question, though, if you're keeping God's Sabbath, why are you keeping God's Sabbath if you doubt God, if you don't believe in God? Because what are you saying when you keep the Sabbath? You're essentially saying, I'm keeping that fourth commandment, part of that fourth commandment. The fourth commandment is two parts. It not only mentions the Sabbath, it mentions the rest of the week also. We have two different things to do. One thing to do on God's Sabbath, something else to do the other 6 days. But all 7 days we keep all of God's commands. Now I'll just mention this briefly, there was a crazy argument that a new pastor general in, what was our one body church for a long time, who tried to poo-poo the Sabbath by saying, you Sabbath keepers, you break God's law all week, but on the seventh day you keep it. And wait a minute, no, we keep the Ten Commandments every day of the week. But he was trying to claim that we only keep the Ten Commandments on the Sabbath. And of course, that's just one of many crazy arguments that the new apostate administration under Junior threw out at us. But wonderful guy, wonderful family, but apostasy is apostasy. It's trying to turn the truth of God into a lie. And the truth of God is the truth. It's not a lie. So you people that are trying to flip it, you're upside down, at least for now. Hopefully God will turn you right side up. He did the Apostle Paul, who was called Saul for a while he was killing Christians. And he had to blind him and turn him up, turn him right side up. And not that I expect God to do that during this present age, but at some point, second resurrection, sometime, if these people that are running the apostasy and who've gone into apostasy were never called, we'll see them called and straightened out in the second resurrection time. Now, if they were called now and they chose a paycheck over keeping God's truth, woe to those. Because, I wouldn't want to be standing in their shoes. All right, I'm hoping the fellows are tuned in with us that I wanted to play this for because, I didn't finish the answer to that question. If you're keeping God's Sabbath, what you're saying when you're keeping God's Sabbath is we are honoring the Creator and remembering Him, recognizing Him, remembering Him, as the command says to do. Remember your Creator, and that's. Let me flip Exodus 20 or Leviticus or Deuteronomy 5, but let's go Genesis, Exodus. Let's go to Exodus 20 real quickly. And, that in 6 days, verse 11, in 6 days God made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day, wherefore the eternal Lord God blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Well, let's flip over to Deuteronomy 5. Because I think it may be expounded a little further in Deuteronomy 5. And the Ten Commandments, let's see, all right, here we are. Verse 14, actually go back verse 13, verse 12. Keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it. Verse 12, Deuteronomy 5, as the eternal Lord your God has commanded you, set it apart. 6 days, verse 13, 6 days shall you labor and do all your work. See, that's part of the fourth command. The other 6 days are covered. We're told to work those 6 days. But, verse 14, the seventh day is the Sabbath of the eternal Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you nor your son nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your ox, nor your ass, nor any cattle, any of your cattle, nor your stranger that's within your gates, that your manservant and your maidservant may rest as well as you. And verse 15, remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out thence with a mighty hand and by stretched arm. Therefore, the eternal Lord your God commands you to keep the Sabbath day. And, okay, so we don't work on it, and actually I was hoping to find a little more on that, but I want to launch on into this. If you're keeping the Sabbath day, you're remembering your Creator. Because as it says, in 6 days he made the heavens and the earth, or, he recreated them, and got the dust and the gas and the poisons away from them that the devil had caused during his rebellion. And we're to pause and remember him on this day. So if you're keeping the Sabbath, you're saying, hey, I know God exists. If you say, well, I'm questioning God's existence, what are you doing keeping the Sabbath? It doesn't fit. But hopefully, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from keeping the Sabbath, but hopefully we'll help this by going through Mr. Armstrong's well-done booklet. One of the earliest writings of it that I saw was a Plain Truth magazine. I don't mean at the time, but I mean from archives and from looking at libraries of historical records. The Plain Truth 1954 was the first time Mr. Armstrong published an article entitled "Does God Exist?" that was later put into a booklet. And we're going to read from the booklet. I'm going to try to get through as much of it as we can tonight, so let me go ahead. And I'm just hoping the fellows are here. If you're not, I can let you know where to find archive later. So that'll work, because this is being recorded and going into to an archive. I do want to mention, though, that, Passover, we've got this extra month in God's Hebrew calendar this year because of it being an extended year, a pregnant year. Let's just go ahead and, for convenience sake, call it a leap year this year, where there's a 13th month added to the calendar. So beside this 18th day of the 12th month, we'll have another 29, 30 days in Adar 2, in a 13th month this year on the Hebrew calendar. So we got the rest of the 12th month, and then another whole 13th month before we get to the real spring, to the beginning of the year, the first day of the first month, and then we count 14 days into that, and we have the Passover memorial and the foot washing service soon after sunset on the 14th of the first month. But we got about 2 months to go before that comes up. Just a point of reference there. Okay, let me get the screen that's got the text on it, and I'm going to just scroll the text and read it to you as we go here. And let me just take that off the screen. Okay, and then at some point I'll probably edit this out of the video. I'll edit the video and just put this in a special folder somewhere for those who want to listen to a video with audio and scrolling text for this booklet. Okay, let me pause and give it an introduction in case I edit out all of this intro in front of it and just use this next part later. Does God Exist? By Herbert W. Armstrong, being read aloud to you tonight by Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath. Can the existence of God be scientifically proved? Where did first life come from? Can we know whether God possesses mind power? Let's face this question. Is it rational to believe in God? Is God merely a myth, an invention of an ignorant, superstitious past? Many today assume this. I questioned God's existence. With me, and I hope with the reader or the listener-viewer, I wanted to know. I wanted to be sure. I questioned the existence of God. Also, I questioned the opposing doctrine of evolution. I did not seek to disprove either, but I did research and carefully examine the evidences on both sides of this two-sided question. For this question is the very starting place for the acquisition of all knowledge. It is the foundation for understanding. In my in-depth research into this question, starting 56 years ago, I emptied my mind of prejudice. I sought the truth, whether it was what I wanted to believe or not. There are the two possibilities of origins: special creation by a creator God, and the theory of evolution. It has become intellectually fashionable to accept the evolutionary doctrine. It has won popular acceptance in science and higher education. Even many professing Christian denominations have accepted it, if only passively. Yet, though in the minority, there still remain scientists, educators, and fundamental religious groups, as well as those in Judaism, who cling to belief in the existence of God. Don't assume. Know. Many of these, however, especially among the more or less religious individuals, have merely assumed the existence of God. Why? Simply because they were taught it from childhood. It's been believed in the circles in which they have lived or associated, but few have proved it. Of course, on the other hand, perhaps a vast majority who accept evolution, at least passively, were simply swept into that acceptance in college or university. It becomes the scholarly in thing. The opposite belief, special creation, has not been widely taught. It has not been objectively examined. Too frequently, proponents utilize the psychological ploy that is a badge of scholarly status to accept evolution and a stamp of ignorance or intellectual inferiority to doubt the hypothesis. All of which goes to show that people in general believe what they do. People in general believe what they do simply because they've been taught it, or because it's been accepted in their particular social environment. People want to belong. They go along with their particular group in general. They believe what they've taken carelessly for granted without examination or proof. Of course, I know well, too, that people generally believe only what they are willing to accept. In most instances, people feel no compulsion to refuse what is accepted in their social or geographical environment. In most instances, people feel no compulsion to refuse what is accepted in their social or geographical environment. As one philosopher said, most dyed-in-the-wool evolutionists accept the theory because of their reluctance or unwillingness to believe in God. They, as the book professing to be the Word of God says, the carnal mind is enmity, hostile against God, for it's not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. Romans 8, verse 7. All the facts, positive evidence, rational reasoning, and proofs in the world will never induce such a one to accept that which he is prejudiced. For prejudice is a barrier to the entrance of truth into any mind. I found proof. I was forced on examination of the facts to realize there's no proof for the theory of evolution. It is purely a theory, a belief, a faith, not based on proof, though its zealous proponents push it onto the world as if it were proven fact. I found proof of the existence of the Creator God. I also found proof that the book called the Holy Bible is, in fact, the very inspired revelation from that all-intelligent, all-knowing God of the vital, necessary, basic knowledge and instruction without which man is unable to solve his problems, prevent his evils, or live in peace, happiness, universal prosperity, and abundant well-being here on earth. Man is the crowning product of his Maker. The Bible is our Maker's instruction manual he sent along with his product. Which God? An atheist wrote me, "We have the history of many religions and many gods. Which one of these gods do you claim for your God? And how do you know that he exists?" That's a fair question. It deserves an answer. Yes, my friends, I have a God. The gods of some nations have been carved by men's hands out of wood, stone, or other existing material. The gods of some religions and individuals have been carved out of human imaginations and faulty human reasonings. Some have worshipped the sun or other inanimate objects of nature. All these gods are merely the created, most of them formed and fashioned by man, therefore inferior to man. But he who did the creating, he who brought everything that exists into existence, including all else falsely called God, he who created all matter, force, and energy, who created all natural laws and set them in motion, who created life and endowed some of it with intelligence, he is God. He is superior to all else that is called God. He alone is God. Creation is the proof of God. But during the past 2 centuries especially, there has developed among God-rejecting men in the Occidental world the mental disease of theophobia. 200 years ago, it appeared under the popular catchphrases deism and rationalism. Then it masqueraded itself as the appealing name higher criticism. This pseudo-scholarship employed as it advanced such attractive titles as progress, development, and evolution. It has appealed to the intellectual vanity of a world groping in spiritual darkness in an era of widespread diffusion of knowledge. Creation without a creator. The theory of evolution provided the atheist an explanation of a creation without a creator. But this misguided rationalism failed utterly to account for the origins of things and of life. And today, the more candid among geologists and biologists confess they do not know how life could have evolved from inanimate matter through the simple life forms to the complex, interdependent species we see all about us, finally to man. Lamarck's theory of use and disuse, Darwin's natural selection, and other theories have now fallen by the wayside, and the mutations theory explains only the occurrence of varieties less fit to survive. Amazing new knowledge of science. Now, suppose we confine ourselves to facts. What then has science actually determined? Discovery and study of radioactivity during the past century has proved that there has been no past eternity of matter. Radioactivity is described as a process of disintegration. The atomic age is opening up new fields to explore. Soon after Madame Curie discovered the element radium in 1898, it was discovered that radium and the other radioactive elements, as we now know, are continually giving off radiations. Has matter always existed? So notice carefully what this now disclosed fact of science means. Uranium is a radioactive element heavier than radium. It has an atomic weight of 238.5. In decomposing, it gives off a helium atom, weight 4, repeated 3 times, and then the substance left is radium, atomic weight 226.4. Radium, then, is simply the end product of uranium after it has lost 3 helium atoms. Then the disintegration continues in radium, and the final product of this process of radioactive disintegration is the element lead. Now, of course, this process requires great periods of time. The calculated half-life of radium is 1,590 years. Uranium, much longer. I have seen it myself in the darkroom of an X-ray laboratory. A tiny portion of radium was placed on a mirror at the far end of a hollow tube, and I looked into this tube through a magnifying glass at the other end. Under this magnification, what I saw appeared as a large, vast, dark sky with thousands of shooting stars falling toward me from all directions. Actually, what I saw were the emanations of tiny particles being emitted by the radium, greatly magnified. We know, therefore, that there has been no past eternity of matter. When matter did not exist, the radioactive elements in existence today have not yet been in existence long enough to have run their course and disintegrated into lead. To have always existed without any definite time of starting in the past, this life period of radioactive elements long ago would have run its course. All radioactive elements would have long ago disintegrated into lead. Since these elements exist only for a definite span of years, and all the uranium, radium, thorium, and other radioactive elements in the world today have not yet existed that many years, there was a time prior to the duration of this span in the past when these elements did not exist. Here we have definite scientific proof that matter has not always existed. Here we have definite, specific elements which once, in the long ago, did not yet exist. Then there came a time later when these elements came into existence. Evolution usually postulates that these things come about gradually through the slow-moving natural process of the present. Try to imagine, if you can, something coming into existence out of nothing gradually. Can your mind entertain the idea? I think not. No, I think you are rational. You will have to accept, he says, I think not. No, I think if you are rational, you will have to accept the fact of a special and necessary instantaneous creation, and some power or someone had of necessity to do the creating. There is a cause for every effect, and in accepting that inevitable fact proved by the findings of science of the existence of that great first cause, you have accepted the fact of the existence and pre-existence of the Creator God. Where did life come from? But how about the presence of life? How did life get here? Science has learned some things about that too. The wisest of the ancients did not know what science makes available today. Thus, it is demonstrated today that life comes only from life, and that each kind reproduces only after its kind. Genesis 1, verse 25. The works of Tyndall and Louis Pasteur in the field of bacteria and protozoa finally demonstrated scientifically once and for all in these more minute fields what Reddy first demonstrated with larger organisms. All the advances of medical and surgical science in the treatment and prevention of germ diseases are based upon this great truth of the law of biogenesis, that life can only come from pre-existing life. No fact of science stands more conclusively proved today. Life cannot come from dead matter. There's not one shred of truth from science to account for the presence of life upon the earth by any means other than a special creation by the great original first cause, God, who is life and the fountain source of all life. It is now absolutely certain, according to all that can be known from science, according to all that is rational, that it required a real creation to produce life from the non-living, organic from inorganic matter. Life only from life. One cannot rationally deny the existence of my God unless he can account for the origin of life without a creator who himself is life. The Creator, therefore, begins to be revealed by science and by reason as a living God, a God in whom is life, and who alone has imparted life to all that have it. I could go further and show you that what science has discovered about energy and its origin and the laws of conservation of energy also proves conclusively that the works were finished from the foundation of the world, Hebrews 4, verse 3, that the material creation is a completed work which is not now going on. Next, then, let's examine whether the great first cause is a being of intelligence or merely some blind, dumb, unintelligent force. Is anything superior to your mind? Look about you. You admit that the transmission of knowledge to your mind is limited to the channels of your five senses. So now I ask you, do you know of anything that is superior to your mind? Look at the planets coursing through the sky. Behold in all its splendor the entire cosmic universe with its suns, its nebulae, and galaxies. Yes, they are inanimate. They have no mind, no intelligence. They cannot do what you can do, think, reason, plan, and carry out plans according to private volition and will. The human mind can know, think, reason, plan, and carry out its plans to execution. It can invent and produce instruments by which it may acquire knowledge of the vast universe or of the minutest particle. By developing rockets and computers, man is able to send astronauts to the moon and bring them back alive. He can cause rivers to run backward, turn the forces of nature to serving human needs, and now he has learned how to release the energy of the atom and utilize a power so vast that man is able at last to annihilate all life from the earth. But there remains one thing no man ever has been able to do. He cannot build, make, produce, or create anything that is superior to himself. A man can take existing materials and out of them build a house, An automobile is almost a living thing, but the intelligence and powers required to invent and produce it are superior to the thing produced. The supreme intelligence to suggest to you that anything you could invent, make, build, or bring into being could be superior in intelligence and ability to you and your mind would certainly insult your intelligence. Now let me ask you candidly, do you honestly believe that any power or force of less intelligence than your mind produced you? If you do not believe in my God, then you have only the alternative of believing that something less than your intelligence produced you. That dumb, purposeless unintelligence brought into being your intelligence. The only rational possibility is to acknowledge that the very presence of the human mind is proof that the great first cause is also the supreme intelligence, infinitely superior to the abilities of mortal man. You were creator? Suppose that you could add to your powers of reasoning, planning, designing, the actual creative power so that you could project your will anywhere to produce and bring into being whatever your mind should plan and desire. Then suppose you undertook the designing, creating, fashioning, shaping, and setting in motion a limitless cosmic universe with planets and suns and nebulae and galaxies in all their splendor, each of these vast units being of such intricate and complex construction as the existing universe. On one of these planets, you would plan and produce all the forms of life that exist on this planet. And I do not mean reproduce, for there would be no present universe to copy. There would be worlds within a world, down to the minutest infinitesimal particles of matter we cannot even see by the aid of the most powerful microscopes. Do you think your mind would be equal to the task? Just stop and think. Is it rational, then, to believe that any power or force lacking even human intelligence could have planned, designed, created, formed, fashioned, shaped, put together, and set in motion the awesome universe we behold? The first great cause who created matter, then, stands revealed as the supreme intelligence and architect of the universe. The miracle of living food. But again, I say, look about you. Here are human beings on this earth, composed mainly of certain specific elements of matter, living organic matter. These elements of life must be supplied and replenished through food, water, and air. No man, with all his ingenuity and science and laboratory facilities, can produce food. That is, he cannot take plain inorganic matter and turn it into the living substance we call food. But some power, force, intelligence, or being did in some way at some time start the process going, a process far too wonderful for any man to devise or produce. And so it is that out of the ground grows grass and green leafy vegetables and all other vegetables and vines and trees yielding fruit, each with its seed in itself, each through this seed reproducing after its kind, and it is very good. But when a marvelous little grain of wheat is planted in the ground, A plant develops and sprouts above the ground, and in some manner too wonderful for any human mind to understand or imitate. The elements drunk in through the roots from the ground are utilized by the life germ in the seed or wheat, and new grains of wheat appear. During this process, the inorganic iron and other elements dissolved in the ground, drunk into the roots, and carried up into the new grain of wheat, have been actually converted into organic matter, which can be assimilated as food. And this same marvelous process takes place in the growth out of the ground of all grains, vegetables, fruits, and foods. When we eat animal meat, we are merely consuming secondhand the vegetation which the animal ate. Man, with all his vaunted science, his technical laboratory facilities, with all his inventive genius, lacks the intelligence and the powers to produce a grain of wheat or to convert inorganic matter into living food. Then is it rational to say that forces or powers exist of no intelligence which have been able to produce this living miracle of food? Did not a far greater intelligence than man design, create, and supply man with all of this? Man's intelligence versus God's. But now let's compare the wisdom and intelligence of man with that of God, who brought these marvels into being and keeps them functioning. The grain of wheat God causes to grow out of the ground is a perfect food. But like other perfect gifts from God, man fails to value the priceless perfection of the all-wise God, and undertaking to improve on God's handiwork, man perverts, pollutes, and defiles it. Every bit of God's perfection man's hand has ever touched, it would seem, he has besmirched it, spoiled it, and polluted it. Every bit of God's perfection man's hand has ever touched, it would seem, he has besmirched, spoiled, and polluted. And the poor, defenseless grain of wheat is no exception. Into flour mills of human devising go the millions of bushels of healthful wheat. Yes, the sugar refiners do the same thing to sugar. And nearly all foods on the market for human consumption today have gone through man's factories and suffered from man's processes until they have been devitalized, depleted of their health-giving properties, and turned from foods into slow-acting poisons. And these foodless foods, with which man has tampered in lust for profits, have produced in human bodies a whole series of diseases of which our forefathers of a few generations ago never heard. Result, today human beings drop dead before their time with heart failure, others die with cancer, the population suffers rheumatism, arthritis, diabetes, kidney diseases, anemia, colds, fevers, pneumonia, and thousands of other diseases. We respond to the toothbrush and toothpaste ads and frantically brush our teeth, but our teeth keep decaying, and we lose them beginning at an early age because of lack of calcium and fluorine in our diet. Whose intelligence is higher? That of the God who provided every perfect need for every living thing, or that of greedy, gullible, God-rejecting humans who, in the interest of bigger profits and more luxuries for themselves, have robbed the very foods God created and gave us of their health and bodybuilding values. There was no watchmaker. I needed an accurate watch with a very plain dial for timing broadcast. The only kind that filled the need was a railroad watch. I have one, the very finest railroad watch made, a 23 jewel watch. But it does not keep perfect time. Once or twice a week, I have to adjust it a second or two if I want to be sure it is accurate to the second. I set it by the master clock of my city, or any U.S. city, which is always found at the Western Union office. But even this clock does not keep perfect time. Once or twice a week, it must be adjusted by a second or two to the master clock of the nation by telegraph from the Naval Observatory, Washington, D.C. There at the Naval Observatory, it is the master clock of the USA. But this great master clock of the United States is not perfect either. It, too, must be adjusted and corrected occasionally. Yes, it is corrected by the master clock of the universe, up in the skies, by astronomers. Up there in the heavens is the great master clock that never makes a mistake, is always on time, never off a fraction of a second. The heavenly bodies coursing through the skies. Now, you, sir, my doubting friend, if I show you my fine precision 23 jewel railroad watch and tell you that it was not made in a factory after all, in fact, it was not designed, planned, put together by any watchmaker at all, that it just sort of happened, that the iron ores just brought themselves up out of the ground, refined themselves, formed and shaped themselves into the delicate little cogs and wheels and other pieces. The silicon just came of its own accord out of the earth and turned itself into the glass crystal. The gold case just refined itself, shaped itself. The cogs and wheels and scores of little parts just assembled themselves together and in that case wound themselves up and started themselves running and keeping almost perfect time. Well, if I should try to tell you anything like that, you'd tell me I'm crazy or a fool, would you not? Certainly. You know that the presence of that watch is rational and positive proof of the existence of a watchmaker or watchmakers who thought it all out, planned it, formed it, shaped it, put it together, and started it running. Master clock of the universe, but then you, Mr. Skeptic, you look up into the great vast sky at the master clock of the universe, which never misses a second, the perfect watch by which we must constantly set all our imperfect man-made watches, and you tell me that all just happened. There was no great watchmaker, no master mind thought out and planned that vast universe, brought it into being, set each star and planet in its own exact place, and started the myriad heavenly bodies coursing through space, each in its prescribed orbit, in its orderly precision. No, it just fastened itself, put itself together, wound itself up, and started itself running. There was no intelligence, no planning, no creation, no God. Do you say that to me? If you can, I answer that I do not respect your intelligence. And the God I acknowledge replies to you, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Psalm 14, verse 1, Psalm 53, verse 1. If you can look about you and observe how intelligently planned and executed is everything in nature and in plant and animal life, everything we see except the bungling, botching, polluting of God's beautiful handiwork by the clumsy hand of God ignoring and rejecting man, and then say you doubt the existence of an all-wise, all-knowing, all-powerful Creator God, then I do not have much faith either in your rational processes or your sincerity as a seeker of the truth. Part 2, 7 Proofs God Exists by Garner Ted Armstrong. This is the most vital decade of all history. Never has it been more urgently necessary to answer the question, does God exist? Atheists and evolutionists assume he does not. Churchgoers and some Christians assume he does. It's time to quit assuming. It's time you saw the proof. There is a delusion gripping the minds of more people today than communism. It holds them in its sway, deluding and deceiving them, making them veritable slaves. It is the concept of no God. Sir Julian Huxley, grandson of the famed evolutionist, has stated, there is no longer either need or room for supernatural beings capable of affecting the course of events in the evolutionary pattern of thought. The earth was not created, it evolved. So did all the animals and plants that inhabit it, including our human selves, mind, and soul, as well as brain and body. Is there no longer any need for a concept of God? Is the Bible merely a collection of Hebrew fables or the dynamic living word of an intelligent? Or is it the dynamic living word of an intelligent, all-wise creator being? These questions demand an answer. Your very life, the lives of your loved ones, and the future of this world hang in the balance. Proof number 1. Need Christians be afraid or apprehensive of science textbooks? Is the Bible totally out of harmony with all science? Do modern-day discoveries in the sciences render the Christian helpless to reconcile his belief with the enlightened age in which he lives? The first positive proof of the existence of God is so broad, so all-encompassing, so diverse in its many ramifications that it is possible only to barely scratch the surface in this booklet. However, there can be no clearer way to substantiate this proof than to quote from a typical college textbook which discards the Bible record. In the forward material, the authors offer various explanations as to the origin of the earth. Our own galaxy, which we remember is but a tiny part of the universe, has probably existed 1,000,000 years. But some progress has been made in attempting to explain how and when the sun and its 9 planets came into being. The study of the solar system gives us at least a clue to the origin of that part of the universe most important to us, the Earth. The explanation commonly accepted today is called the hypothesis of dynamic encounter, formulated about 1900 by T.C. Chamberlain and F.R. Moulton of the University of Chicago. In brief, It suggests that our solar system had its birth when the sun was approached by another huge star. The latter, through the operation of the law of gravitation, detached from the sun great masses of flaming gas. The orphan masses from the parent sun gradually cooled and crystallized to become the nuclei of planets. These continued to revolve around the sun, held in their orbits by the gravitational pull of the parent body. The evolution of the Earth to its present state was very gradual. Wallbank and Taylor, Civilization Past and Present, Volume 1, page 31. Even though it's outdated in certain respects, I quote this statement in full for a very special reason. Let's go back and carefully analyze what we have just read. Guesses versus factual proof. Notice carefully the italicized words in the quotation you've just read. We have such words in the opening phrase as probably some progress has been made, attempting to explain at least a clue, explanation commonly accepted, hypothesis, and it suggests. What a collection! Here are numerous attempts to explain, some progress being made, at least a clue, and the suggestion of a hypothesis, the very word itself meaning we guess. Then, in very careful wording, having begun with a number of possibilities and perhapses, the book begins to tell of definite past occurrences which are said to have taken place. But let's analyze further. Let's get to the very trunk of the tree of this very vital first proof of the existence of God. In the beginning, the writers, even though beginning with many attempts to explain clues and guesses, admit the existence of our solar system, a sun, another huge star, the operation of the law of gravitation, great masses of flaming gas, and admit that these gases gradually cooled. They also mention how these gases crystallized and then continued to revolve around the sun, held in their orbits by the gravitational pull of the parent body. What a fantastic array! Here is a tremendous, limitless, imagination-defying expanse, an entire universe. Here's a whole solar system, a huge sun, the operation of certain definite, immutable, unchangeable laws. Here's a supposed collision between gigantic, breathtakingly huge astral bodies, resulting in the supposed formation of our present solar system. Must admit laws existed. Think of it. All of these myriad laws of heat, light, energy, motion, the rotation of astral bodies, the laws of gravity, the principle of isostasy, which demands that every orbital body must gradually assume and maintain a near round shape, and myriad other laws, and entirely too numerous to mention, are admitted to exist. Get back to the real trunk of the tree. Where is the place to begin? Is it an attempt to explain the existence of our present solar system? Decidedly not. Scientists and astronomers tell us that our solar system is only one of many such systems in our great galaxy called the Milky Way. However, even our galaxy is only one of myriad galaxies, which form only a part of the vast, limitless expanse of the universe. Our planet, astronomers assure us, is merely a third-rate planet in a second-rate solar system, lost in the expanses of seemingly limitless space. Do you begin to comprehend? By what law did one star approach another? By what law did heat gradually cool? By what law was there a gravitational pull? By what law was there the existence of the operation of the law of gravitation? Yes, there it is, in dissecting and looking carefully into the statements of some of the preposterous hypotheses which have been advanced. You begin to see that in every case, the writers have begun with an orderly, law-abiding universe governed by irrefutable laws. Did matter, force, energy laws evolve? Evolution purports to explain how the earth came to be, how man came to be. It's the atheist attempt to explain the question of origins without a creator, without intelligence. But where do they start? Not with any explanation of how matter came to be, without a creator. Not with any explanation of how laws came to be, or what causes them to work. Not with any explanation of how matter, force, energy, such laws as gravity and inertia developed, without a creator. Is any explanation of the question of origins, in any explanation of the question of origins, one must explain the origins of matter, force, energy, gravity, inertia, and the other laws, as well as the origin of life. But evolutionists start with all these already created and in existence. Therefore, the evolutionists, in fact, acknowledge creation before their explanations actually begin. They are thus forced to acknowledge the pre-existence of the Creator, for they begin their theories and explanations with these works of His creation already having been created. They begin with matter and laws already created and existing. The existence of law, unchangeable, immutable, irrevocable, unseen, and yet active, absolutely demands the existence of a great lawgiver. There's one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. James 4, verse 12. That lawgiver is God. Proof number 2. Before seeing the next amazing, irrefutable proof, it is first necessary to state in simple terms the meaning of the word evolution. Of course, there are many processes called evolution. The process of development of music from simple to complex is, in a sense, an evolutionary process, as is true in all technological inventions. This has perhaps led many to assume such a development is also true in organic living material. Here is one such stated idea. Evolution is the gradual development from the simple, unorganized condition of primal matter to the complex structure of the physical universe, and in like manner, from the beginning of organic life on this habitable planet, a gradual unfolding and branching out into all the various forms of beings which constitute the animal and plant kingdom. Richard Swan Lull, Organic Evolution, page 6. Evolution theorizes from the beginning of organic life, already having life with which to begin. It does not show, nor has it ever shown, nor will it ever be able to show, how life itself first came into existence. The theory of evolution, the word theory means we think, states simply that all life forms that we know today, including humankind, have gradually evolved from the most simple life forms to the complex, intricate, interdependent species we see about us today, each reproducing according to its own kind. Evolution postulates that life evolved in a gradual process by resident forces into the complexity of life we see about us today. And herein, all the very basic trunk of the tree of all evolutionary thought lies one of the greatest proofs of God. And herein, at the very basic trunk of the tree of all evolutionary thought, lies one of the greatest proofs of God. Evolutionists, geneticists, biologists, scientists, in any field whatsoever, have never been able to demonstrate nor to offer the slightest evidence that the not living can make itself into the living. It is true that certain laboratory experiments have taken place in which supposed dead cells are said to have been revived and brought back to life by the means of certain chemical compounds. In other experiments, scientists have diligently tried to reproduce organic-type compounds called amino acids. This, however, is a far cry from spontaneous generation. Chasm between life and death. There's a broad, gaping, yawning chasm of separation between life and death. The great gap between the not living and the living is so broad, so insurmountable, so unfathomable by man, that evolutionists can only suppose and guess, offering vague, ethereal, nebulous theories as to how life, for the first time, might have begun accidentally, and by resident forces excluding the existence of an all-intelligent creator. However, on the other hand, there's an absolute demonstrable law of science which comprises the second major proof of the existence of a life-giving God. That is the law of biogenesis. Bio means life. Genesis means beginning. This law, then, is a law concerning the beginning of life. This law, simply stated, is the absolute law that life comes only from life, that the not living can never give rise to, give birth to, or produce the living. There is perhaps no law known to science that can be any more firmly and easily demonstrated than the law of biogenesis. The very existence of life demands a life giver. God states dogmatically, "And the Lord, eternal God, formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." Genesis 2, verse 7. Almighty God, the life self-existent, the one who has life, who is life, who was before all things, imparted life to the first man, and set within man, the animals, and all plants, the cyclical character of life, which enables them to reproduce according to certain set laws. God is the great life giver. Proof number 3. Many of these amazing proofs of the existence of an almighty God overlap. That is, each is to a degree interrelated with the other. The third major proof of God can be stated quite simply from the quotation you saw under proof number 1. You'll notice that evolutionists, in trying to substantiate their theory, always begin with an orderly universe and the existence of matter. Notice the so-called theory of evolution begins with matter, laws, and simple life. What is matter? Matter occupies space and has weight. It's not always necessarily seen, since certain gases, and even the air which you breathe, are also classified as matter. Until recently, scientists talked of the law of conservation of matter. However, with the discoveries in nuclear physics and following Madame Curie's experiments with radium, scientists have now found that there's a certain amount of disintegration in matter. This deterioration of uranium is a scientific fact. Uranium, U-238, gradually disintegrates through many intermediate stages into lead, Pb-206. Uranium, as you may well know, is radioactive and gives off energy in the form of radiation. Gradually, over a period of seemingly limitless years, this radioactive material disintegrates into lead. There is no proof of any new uranium coming into existence today. Hence, science has firmly established that there has been no past eternity of matter. Matter must have at some time come into existence. It had to have been at some time created. Creation, then, the very existence of things, absolutely demands and requires a creator. That which is made requires a maker. That which is produced requires a producer. Therefore, the third great proof that the creation requires a great creator. The third great proof is that the creation requires a great creator. Proof number 4, the one who is quoted in the first person as being God, said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and every living thing that creeps upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Genesis 1, verses 24 and 25. Scientists have attempted to show the evolutionary pattern by comparative embryology, by a study of selective breeding, genetics, and various other aspects of biology. However, without taking the tremendous amount of space necessary to even faintly scratch the surface of such a broad subject, suffice it to say, there is an absolute, irrefutable, irrefutable, immutable, unchangeable law which absolutely prohibits a jump from one kind to another kind. Varieties, not kinds. There are hundreds of different varieties within the dog kind. And while there may be small, tiny dogs, such as the Mexican Chihuahua, and also huge dogs, such as the St. Bernard or the Great Dane, they are still dogs. They are not cats or horses, nor are they even beginning to show a gradual trend toward developing into another kind of animal. They are all of the same kind. Comparative embryology tries to point out that the beginning embryos of fish, polywogs, and humans look very much alike. This is absolutely true, but while it proves absolutely nothing for the case of evolution, this does offer a stronger proof of the existence of God. Scientists are defied to attempt to make the embryo of a fish turn out to be a polywog, a man, or anything other than a fish of the exact same kind of fish which laid the egg in the first place. Scientists have attempted to prove their evolutionary theories by selective breeding and studies in mutations. These do not prove evolution. They prove rather the existence of absolute unchangeable laws governing the reproduction of all animal and plant life, and that those laws function within certain limited bounds that cannot be transcended or broken. While we are able to breed and cultivate today new varieties within a great kind, they are still of the same kind and not a totally new type of life. Any farmer who labors in his field raising corn, wheat, or other crops knows some of the basic proofs of selective breeding. Scientists working with guinea pigs or other animals in laboratories can arrange an absolute pattern of just how the genes and chromosomes are going to react in the interbreeding of certain animals according to their coloring and various characteristics. They are able to tell in advance just exactly what the offspring are going to look like. Again, this does not prove anything except demonstrate the existence of an all-wise, all-powerful God who made these laws and who also sustains them. The fact God said, "Let the earth bring forth after his kind," and has been enforcing and sustaining that law ever since, is the fourth major proof of the existence of God. In attempting to array the skeletons of an orangutan, in attempting to array the skeletons of an orangutan, chimpanzee, ape, gorilla, and a man, evolutionists assure us that there is a definite pattern showing all have come from one common ancestor. This is an absolute fallacy. And again, this merely serves to show another clear proof of God. It does not prove an evolutionary process. It does not prove an evolutionary process, but it does prove rather, if men were willing to look at the facts, similarity of design. It shows that the same architect had the same general plan and design in mind. It shows functional similarity, not the evolution of one into the other. This absolutely proves not only the existence of a lawgiver, but that there is alive, acting right now, a great sustainer of all that is. These laws are upheld, sustained, kept in action. How? By the sustainer, who is God. Proof number 5. Look about you. You live in a complex, intricate, and interdependent world. It's a world of great design. You've never seen an ugly sunset. You've never seen an ugly scene in the desert, in the mountains, at sea, or anywhere on the surface of this entire earth, unless it were a scene made ugly by man. All is in harmony. Life, as we know it, is entirely interdependent upon other forms of life. Nothing lives or dies to itself. The question to the evolutionist is, which evolved first, the flower or the bee? Did the bee evolve slowly for thousands, millions, or billions of years, independent of the flowers and the pollens from growing things which are his life source? Did the flowers and the flowering trees all evolve slowly and gradually over a period of millions or billions of years, independent of the little bee, upon whom they must rely for their very continuation of life? Unanswerable questions. These are totally unsurmountable and unanswerable questions to the evolutionist. The old question, which came first, the chicken or the egg, is a question which the evolutionist feels worthy only of disdain. Why? Simply because he cannot answer it. It is better, from his point of view, to merely scoff, make fun of, and attempt to dismiss such a question which he cannot answer. When he cannot answer it. It's better, from his point of view, to merely scoff, make fun of, and attempt to dismiss such a question when he cannot answer it. This total interdependency of all life forms, the tremendous design within this universe, shows a common beginner, one main architect, one great designer with an overall framework of a plan of creation into which all life forms fit. Nothing lives or dies to itself. Each living thing, whether plant or animal, when it dies, supplies further life for other living things. Observe a forest. A tree grows, finally dies and falls, only to become part of the fallow forest floor, supplying life-giving elements for the young trees which it had sown in its lifetime. This great universe and the complex, intricate earth on which you live and draw breath is a world of great design. It is a world of such complex and intricate design as to take the very breath in beginning to investigate even the minutest part. It is a world of such complex and intricate design as to take the very breath in beginning to investigate even the minutest part. The cleavage properties of minerals, the wings of a bird or a fly, the beauty of a sunset, the facets of quartz crystal, and above all, the marvelous, tremendous masterpiece of all design, the human body, all point out that for such intricate design, there had to be an eternal designer. Design in the universe proves the existence of a designer. If you're interested in more details about the design in nature, write for our free full-color booklet, A Theory for the Birds, A Whale of a Tale, and Fishy Stories about Evolution. You can find those online. There's no place to write to them anymore. You'll be fascinated with the full-color photographs and vital facts contained in these booklets. Proof number 6. This sixth proof of the existence of an almighty God is perhaps the most astounding of all. About 1/3 of your Bible is prophecy, and while most of that 1/3 pertains to our present day, there are many, many prophecies which have already been fulfilled and which are presently being fulfilled. God sent his prophets thousands of years ago. God sent his prophets thousands of years ago to such major cities as Babylon, Ekron, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Sidon. These prophets, simple human beings who had been commissioned with a message, foretold the events which were to befall each of these ancient cities, and without fail, in every single instance, exactly at the time prescribed. All these things happened. The very fact that God is able to foretell the future and bring it to pass is a great proof of his existence. Proof number 7. This last proof is perhaps the greatest proof of all to true Christians. It is the proof of answered prayer. However, since the skeptics, atheists, and doubters probably have never prayed, and hence have never had prayers answered, they continue to doubt. Now take George Mueller's example. George Mueller is now dead, but he was a great man of faith. He founded 5 great orphanages and other charitable institutions in Bristol, England. He started out as faith always does, with a very small work, without any financial backing, and absolutely no means of support except to get down on his knees and send up a believing prayer to God. For nearly 70 years, George Mueller continued that great work, and it grew into a tremendous institution until it housed thousands. Every dime for feeding, clothing, sheltering, and schooling those thousands of orphans came in only one way: as a result of believing prayer. Altogether, he received more than £1,400,000. That was about $7 million sent to him in answer to his prayers. Real answered prayer is not the mere working out of events as a result of concentration. Many people today seem to assume prayer is merely an accomplishment as a result of positive thinking or a psychological adjustment. This is gross error. Real answered prayer is a direct, completely miraculous, supernatural intervention from Almighty God. It's the result of being obedient to God's laws, asking according to His will, and then believing in faith until the answer comes. These 7 irrefutable, unchallengeable proofs of the existence of Almighty God represent only the minutest beginning of the subject. They are, nevertheless, proofs. It's about time people quit assuming. It's about time they began to really prove all things. It's about time you said with Job, "For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth." Job 19, verse 25. And finally, to the hostile, prejudiced skeptic who stubbornly refuses to believe what he does not want to believe, even on seeing proof, if any such have read this far, which I doubt, I say, as the prophet Ezekiel records repeatedly, we are now in the very living generation that shall see the living Christ, the promised Messiah, returning to this earth in the full, supreme power and glory of the Creator God. And then they shall know that He is the living God. As He Himself is quoted as saying, "Thus will I magnify myself, and they shall know that I am the eternal." Ezekiel 38, verse 23. And that's the end of our reading of Does God exists. You can bet your Texas hat and boots that he does. Friends, that's it for our Friday night Bible study. God willing and the creek don't rise. What did I do with my tie? God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll plan to be back here in the morning for Sabbath services, beginning at 9:30 a.m. Central Time. And that's our AM service to the U.S., and it's PM to the U.K. That winds up being Greenwich Meridian Time. Thank you, Italia. 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon, Greenwich Mean Time in London time. All right, we will let me back out of here, and I'll say, wish everybody a good night's sleep, happy Sabbath, and if you're up, you can join us live. Otherwise, we'll have in the archive in the morning. We'll have a recording of the morning service. This Friday night Bible study also be in the archive. All right, let me roll us out of here for so we can all get some good Sabbath rest. Thanks for joining us, and happy Sabbath, everybody.